the governor. But I think that it's important to note that when Governor Cuomo was a candidate for the governorship, he put out a white paper that talked about what his vision was for a clean tech economy, a green economy, and in there was, without qualification, support for solar and support for this type of legislation and this concept about having SREC. So I think it's very important. If we finally got an on-time budget, maybe this year we can finally get a really good piece of solar legislation. You know, it would create more than 22,000 jobs, generate $20 billion in economic development, and the cost would be 39 cents a month on the average homeowner's bill. So I think I would be willing to give up a Starbucks coffee to have a significant renewable energy and solar presence in New York. And for people that say, gee, you know, we don't want to burden ratepayers, there are a number of things in here that are kind of protections. And we've learned our lessons, I think, from New Jersey and other markets where it's really overheated. So we're getting together a very big coalition of environmental groups, business groups, certainly solar companies, folks like ACE New York, NICEA, and others to promote this. So we can certainly use your support. Just a couple other things I want to mention too, and these are all about trying to get the investment in New York. We're working on, or people are familiar with the concept of net metering, or if you put solar or wind, or you have a digester, say on your farm, you produce more energy than you actually use. You get a credit on your utility bill. So then during times when you're pulling power from the grid, you're actually using that credit. And as some municipalities and school districts have gotten money, they found that, gee, maybe I can't fit that many solar panels on the town hall, but I can on the warehouse where we store all the snow blowing equipment. Right now there's some glitches. If they did that, they may not be able to use it and net it against their total energy bill. So we've got some legislation we're working on to make that a lot easier for farms, vineyards, schools, municipalities to actually apply that to more than 1 meter. And I think that's going to be important. And then just finally, one of the things, you know, New York has fallen behind, I think, on the wind side. And a little bit of that is, I think, just timing. Obviously, the economic downturn has made it harder to get financing. But the solicitations that NYSERDA have done, and they have one out right now, has certainly been the driver. We used to be in the top 10, now we're at 13. Hopefully with some of the solicitations and also the interest in offshore wind, we'll be right back in the top 10 in terms of installed wind generation. We're at almost 1,300 megawatts right now, but to put it into perspective, Texas this past year just passed the 10,000 megawatt mark, so we have a long way to go. But getting power plants sited, whether it's wind, whether it's a gas plant, it is becoming increasingly difficult. It's not in my backyard, and we've even seen some pushback on solar. So we're working on getting a one-stop siting and permitting law for power generation back on the books, and I think that will be very important for us as we move forward and start to get more renewables integrated into the grid. And then just finally, I want to say there's a climate action plan that I've worked on along with a lot of the state agencies and other stakeholders, and how New York gets to reducing its carbon footprint. I think it's going to be very important. We're going to need to do as much renewables and energy efficiency as we possibly can, but we're really also going to need storage. That's going to be a key area and component. So I would expect, too, that we may have to do some additional incentives for storage as we move forward. And so I thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Gail. Our next speaker is Frank Murray. Frank was appointed President and Chief Executive Officer of NYSERDA on January 26, 2009. Prior to his appointment, Frank served as senior advisor at the international environmental consulting firm Ecology and Environment, Inc., where he provided strategic policy and market development guidance on environmental and energy issues to a number of private sector and not-for-profit clients. From 1996 to 1997, Frank was policy advisor to the U.S. Secretary of Energy, assisting in the development of the Clinton administration's national energy policy. Frank served from 1992 to 1994 as the New York State Commissioner of Energy and Chairman of the NYSERDA Board of Directors, then a function of the State Energy Commissioner. In 1985, Frank was appointed Deputy Secretary to the Governor for Energy and the Environment, a position he held until 1992. He served from 83 to 85 as Assistant Secretary for Energy and Environment in the administration of New York State Governor Mario Cuomo. One of the things I was told that all three of our panelists have been around in the energy business since the time of Mario Cuomo. So Frank received his Bachelor of Science in Foreign Service, cum laude, from the Edmund Walsh School of Foreign Service at Georgetown University, and his JD from Georgetown University Law School. Frank.
Well, actually, I can predate myself even beyond Carol. I actually go back to the days of Governor Hugh Carey. And when I actually began, most of my work was in the environmental area in those days. The first three things I encountered when I went to work for Governor Carey, and that time was in his Washington, D.C. office just after the New York City fiscal crisis. The first thing I encountered was a beautiful place in western New York known as West Valley, which is the site of the only commercial fuel reprocessing facility in the country. Never did I know that 30 years later I'd actually own that site and still be engaged in the business of cleaning up the waste. My second introduction to New York State, the second issue I had to deal with was Love Canal. That was even before there was a hazardous waste federal legislation, so I was very much engaged in the, back in the days when Al Gore was a freshman congressman, and that was very interesting. And the third introduction I had to New York State was PCBs in the Hudson River. And I actually worked on the first piece of legislation that Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan passed to begin the PCB Hudson River Reclamation Project. And if there ever was a federal project that is an example of how federal government has failed us badly, just the processes, forget the